My father grounded me in front of 30 relatives. I was 32 years old. He stood in my grandmother's living room, surrounded by cousins, aunts, uncles, and announced that I was irresponsible and would receive almost nothing from her estate. He smirked when he said it. What he didn't know, Grandma had already made her move years ago, and 15 minutes later, his own lawyer walked in with paperwork that shattered his authority in front of everyone he'd spent a lifetime trying to impress. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or publicly humiliated by someone who thought they controlled your future, this story is going to feel personal. Hit that like button, subscribe, and settle in. Because sometimes the most satisfying revenge doesn't involve shouting. It just involves the truth arriving at the perfect time. My name is Alara Whitmore. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my life, I was the disappointment. My father, Harold Whitmore, is a retired judge, the kind who never raises his voice because he doesn't have to. His silence is punishment. His approval is currency. And in our family, he was the law. My older brother, Daniel, golden child, corporate attorney, tailored suits, firm handshake, father's clone. Me, I became a social worker. That alone should tell you everything. Growing up, family dinners felt like performance reviews. Daniel would talk about internships at prestigious firms. My father would nod, proud. When it was my turn, I'd talk about community programs or at-risk youth initiatives. My father would sigh. "Sweetheart, that's admirable," he'd say, in that tone people use for toddlers showing crayon drawings. "But when are you going to pursue something serious?" Every word felt like a small paper cut. Nothing dramatic, just constant. My grandmother, Evelyn Whitmore, was the only one who never made me feel small. She used to squeeze my hand at dinners under the table when my father went on one of his monologues about legacy. "Kindness is legacy," she'd whisper to me later in the kitchen. When she passed away, I lost the only person in that house who looked at me like I wasn't a mistake. The funeral was quiet, heavy, controlled. My father handled everything, of course. He always handled everything. A week later, he invited the entire extended family to Grandma's house for what he called a preliminary estate discussion. 30 relatives showed up. 30. It wasn't a reading. It was a performance. We were standing in Grandma's living room, the same room where she used to knit by the window. The air still smelled faintly like lavender and old books. My father stood near the fireplace, hands folded behind his back like he was about to deliver a verdict. "I've reviewed Mother's assets," he announced calmly. "And after debts, charitable donations, and property allocations, there isn't much liquidity left." I felt Daniel glance at me. Then my father continued. "Daniel will assume management of the remaining properties, as expected." As expected. And Alara, he paused. That pause. He loved those pauses. Given her unstable career choices and lack of financial discipline, will receive a modest stipend. Nothing substantial. It would be irresponsible to place significant assets in inexperienced hands. There it was, the word irresponsible, in front of everyone. My aunt looked at me with pity. My cousin avoided eye contact. Daniel stayed quiet. Of course he did. Heat crept up my neck. My hands went cold. My heart pounded, so hard I could hear it in my ears. I opened my mouth to speak, then closed it. Because here's the thing about being raised by a man like my father. You learn that arguing just gives him another stage. So I swallowed it. "Understood," I said softly. He nodded like he'd just disciplined a child. Grounded. At 32. In front of 30 relatives. What he didn't know was that 2 years earlier, Grandma had taken me out to lunch. Just us. No announcements. No witnesses. She'd slid a folder across the table. "I'm old, not foolish," she said. "Your father thinks he controls everything. But this is mine to decide." Inside was paperwork. An irrevocable trust. Already funded. Already filed. I remember staring at it, stunned. "Why me?" I'd asked. She smiled. "Because you don't measure people by their job titles." I never told anyone. She asked me not to. "Let him believe what he wants," she'd said. "The truth will arrive when it's meant to." So when my father humiliated me in that living room, I already knew something he didn't. I just didn't know when the reveal would happen. 15 minutes into his speech, the doorbell rang. The timing felt almost cinematic. My father frowned. "Who is that?" "Our family lawyer, Mr. Caldwell, stepped inside." He looked uncomfortable. That's when I knew. "Harold," he said carefully, holding a leather briefcase, "we need to clarify something regarding Evelyn's estate." The room shifted. Conversation stopped. Chairs scraped softly against hardwood. My father straightened. "Clarify what?" Caldwell cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitmore established an irrevocable trust in 2019. It exists outside the primary will. It names a sole beneficiary." My father's expression didn't change at first. He was good at that. And he said, Caldwell looked at me. "Elara Whitmore." The room inhaled. Silence dropped like glass. My father blinked. Just once. But I saw it. "That's incorrect," he said sharply. Caldwell opened the folder. "It is fully executed, legally binding, and funded with the majority of Evelyn's liquid assets, investment accounts, and 2 properties. 2 properties. Not a stipend. Not pocket change. The majority." Daniel's face drained of color. My aunt actually whispered, "Oh my God." My father's jaw tightened. "That document must have been manipulated," he snapped. Caldwell didn't flinch. "It was drafted by an independent firm, witnessed and notarized. There is no legal avenue to contest it successfully. No legal avenue." Hearing that phrase directed at him, it was like watching gravity reverse. My father turned to me. For the first time in my life, he looked unsure. "You knew," he demanded quietly. I stood up slowly. My knees were shaking, but my voice wasn't. "Grandma trusted me," I said. That was it. No speech. No gloating. Just that. You could feel the shift in the room. The relatives who had pitted me minutes ago were now recalculating their expressions. My father's authority had cracked. Not because I fought him. Not because I yelled. But because he had underestimated the one person he thought he had fully defined. He tried to recover. "This doesn't change the fact that you lack financial experience." I held his gaze. "I manage crisis intervention programs with multi-million-dollar budgets." I replied evenly. "I think I'll manage." Daniel looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Caldwell continued explaining terms. Quarterly distributions, asset management, legal protections. Every word chipped away at my father's narrative. The man who had publicly declared me irresponsible had just been corrected by paperwork. And the most satisfying part? I didn't feel rage. I felt calm. A deep, steady calm that I had never felt around him before. Because for once, the outcome didn't depend on his approval. After the meeting ended, relatives hovered around me with awkward smiles. My father stayed by the fireplace. Small. That was new. As I walked toward the door, he said my name. "Elara!" I stopped. He struggled for something to say. Authority. Control. A new angle. Finally, he said, "You should have told me." I turned back. "You never asked." Then I left. The real revenge wasn't the money. It was the silence that followed him. For weeks, relatives called me directly instead of going through him. Daniel stopped parroting his opinions at dinners. Invitations started including my input. The hierarchy shifted. My father never apologized. He wouldn't know how, but he stopped calling me irresponsible. He stopped using that tone. And the first time he asked, "What do you think?" at a family gathering, that was the real inheritance. Respect. Sometimes justice doesn't look like shouting or revenge plots. Sometimes it looks like patience. Like knowing your worth, even when someone powerful insists you don't have any. My grandmother didn't just leave me assets. She left me proof. And that proof changed everything. If this story hit home, if you've ever waited quietly while someone underestimated you, hit that like button. Tell me in the comments. Have you ever had a moment where the truth completely flipped the power dynamic? And subscribe for more stories where patience pays off in the most satisfying ways. Because sometimes the loudest victory is the one you don't have to shout about.